Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, who formally starts our academic deliberations on this topic. Professor Effy Vayena joins us from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, in Switzerland, where she investigates how advances in science and technology can be ethically applied for the best outcomes in public and personal health. Effy runs something called the Health Ethics and Policy Lab, which extends that work to broader questions of biotech research, including thinking about genomic technologies as well as big data analytics in health. Now, Professor Vayena, we're very honored to have you here because of your expertise in this domain, and we trust that you'll do a wonderful job in setting the context for our meeting.
Thank you so much, Yandina, for the kind introduction. Oh, I'm looking to see where I can see my slides. They're over there. Okay, great. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I've been involved. I was a member of the planning committee, so I've been involved with this meeting for quite a while, and I can tell you it's probably one of the most intense preparations that I've ever had to do, and a lot of things I think have to go to Adrian, who is sitting there in the back. For putting an enormous amount of effort. I think I could have replaced my keynote by telling you, please read the background paper that was on your files and was shared with you, where Adrian put an enormous amount of work. But I thought what I would do in this introductory, let's say, speech to get us going was to maybe try to kind of situate this meeting in a broader context. We have an amazing program, and so many of you have thought hard about the questions we're asking here about AI applications, the ethics of AI in global health. So I thought I should not do a repeat of what we're going to hear, but rather where does this kind of our thinking about the ethical issues in health, in AI, and global research maybe are situated. So I'm going to go for a kind of a broader context, and hopefully this will be useful to the deliberations and the thinking of our meeting. All right, so one of the issues we have in general when we're talking about the ethics of artificial intelligence is that we tend to be on different pages as to what we mean. So just as a starter, we do mean different things, and these terms mean different things to different people. So the way we're thinking maybe, or we kind of could approach this is somehow like this. We have artificial intelligence, which is a kind of a bigger concept, and I put up a couple of definitions here that you can think about. We can see and see actually if you agree or disagree with it. But the point to remember is that artificial intelligence is this bigger concept, and what we often talk about is the methods with which we are actually trying to get to that bigger concept. And machine learning, which is a very popular term, is actually one of those. So the bigger circle, and then machine learning, deep learning, neural networks are the kind of the ways with which, the methods with which we're getting there. This is another way of doing the same thing, but this includes also some other terms that may be familiar and where they belong in this kind of scheme. So this is at least how I am thinking about those terms. Now, some of my colleagues are saying that when you talk to computer scientists, they use AI less as a term. They actually speak more specifically about the particular method you're using. And I think it's important, it's not just being pedantic here. I think what we talk about, how we frame things, it's actually important for what kinds of ethical questions we're thinking about, and probably also what ways are we finding to address some of these ethical questions. So that's for the general kind of definition question. Now, in order for you not to feel lonely if you're using terms interchangeably, I'm putting this up, that I think you could have access to the slides anyway, to show you that it's not just all of us that we're thinking about AI, machine learning, neural networks, and we use them without maybe always having clarity about what they mean. This, what's on the green is the text from the European AI Act. So, as you may know, in Europe, we're trying to regulate AI, and the European Commission has proposed an act. That's the green. Now, it's not finalized. The term, what we mean, what we want to regulate, is already changing from the green to the pink or purple. So even those who are trying to regulate those technologies are still trying to figure out what is that we're regulating. So we are all in this together and trying to figure out what it is that we are doing, and then, of course, what kind of questions that what we're doing is raising for us. Now, I'm kind of borrowing this phrase, and that's what I put also in the title of my talk, from our colleagues in that handbook about the ethics of AI. We are a little confused as to what AI is or what machine learning might be, and we use all those terms perhaps interchangeably, but at the same time, we're very concerned about artificial intelligence ethics. As you know, all of you know that, there's been so much work going on the ethics of AI, very broadly and generally, and although it is work in progress, even our definitions is work in progress, it's a call that has been answered. Well, that doesn't mean, of course, that we're done. It means that we have started thinking about it. We've started thinking about this intensely. In some work that we did and published back in 2019, we had identified 84 guidance documents. And these were not small groups developing a guidance documents for people to think about. These are 85 documents, at least the ones we had identified, at international level, institutional, high-level types of guidance to help us navigate the ethics of artificial intelligence. Another group later on, just even 2 years later, they've stopped collecting now, but they had, in the space of 2 years, identified even more. So a lot of people are thinking about the ethics of AI and how we're going to get that right. It's a very intense debate. Now, in that intensity, we're also seeing different ways of thinking about how to do AI ethics. So they come from different approaches. Some are human rights-based, a lot are ethics principles-based, some are intensely thinking about design, the ethics of design. Some are going straight to tools. We got to get some tools out there for people to be able to use in order to do AI. We've also seen recently something even more interesting, which is that, well, maybe this talk about AI ethics is not where the important things are, and let's shift the conversation from ethics to power. You may be familiar, those of you who are working in the area as well, with Kate Crawford's work, who's been actually advocating for that. Now, you got to stop and think, okay, that's very interesting about the questions of power and what it does with power, but are we not ending then at some similar place, which is, why is it wrong to have that types of power structures? Is it at the end not about fairness or about equity, or the things we're also thinking about when we're doing the AI ethics? I'm bringing this up to show you that when we have all these disciplines and all these different scholars working in this area, we do get very important and interesting insights. We're also getting things like that. the work of Gina and Effy, I don't know if if you're familiar with that. She comes to this not from ethics, but she does talk about it as well. And she's been saying recently that we actually talk less about AI ethics now because, she argues, we talk about things that are more practical. Now, those of us that worked in medical ethics or biomedical ethics thinking like, okay, really, what's the big difference here? Because we do look a lot about when we talk about biomedical ethics, we do talk about also very practical things. So it's interesting for me to observe how this field is actually evolving. And then we have some even more interesting things like this. It's useless, some people would say. Déjà vu, we had that useless, you remember, some of us remember the dignity being a useless concept. When I was reading that, I've seen that somewhere. So people are arguing this, and I've highlighted what they mean. I mean, I think it's a provocative title, but if you read the highlighted part, maybe there's something in here it is worth for us thinking about. The principles, this colleague here argues, are useless because they're failing to mitigate the racial, social, and environmental damages of AI technologies in any meaningful sense. And the result, they argue, is this gap between high-minded principles and technological practice. And they go on. I mean, it's interesting to think about. I'm putting this out here because we are thinking about AI ethics in global health research. So it's important to think about what kind of ethics we're doing always, and in particular in that context. So it is already moving, given the proliferation of thinking about ethics. This is where we are seeing things going at the moment. We're also having a bit more mild critique of the AI ethics, like the work of our colleague from Germany here, Hellinger, who doesn't want to kill AI ethics completely, like the previous paper, but rather to say, let's think carefully about what kind of ethics we're doing. And what he argues in that paper, and I encourage you to take a look at those things, is that we're confused about definitions, so we're not sure what is that we are talking about when we're trying to do the ethics of it. We actually have to ask questions about who is doing the AI ethics. It is true that when we're looking at the guidance document that's been developed, they've been developed primarily in the North, and increasingly also we have guidance coming out from the global South, but that's the predominantly North. And the second thing is, who are those who are in the groups that are developing those guidance? And a big chunk of those guidance did come from the private sector. Pretty much most of this guidance did not include civil society or citizens or those stakeholders that we need to be including. So there are questions that we need to be asking in here. We've also seen things like that, and sorry, it's not going to be all my talk so gloomy, but I'm going to cheer you up in a little bit. But at the moment, I think I have to set it up as what's going on. So we're also having surveys and experts thinking, okay, we're doing all this great work on ethics, but people think actually it's not going to happen. This is from a publication from the Pew Research Center study in 2021, just like a year ago. And it seemed that most of those asked chose the option when they were asked whether AI systems in general, not specifically in health, are going to use, when they're used, are going to employ ethical principles focusing on the public good. Well, most people seem to think that's not going to happen. That's pretty sad, but because they argue that it's more about profits and social control than public good. Okay, and we want, I don't know if I would ask you what you think, whether 68% of you would answer the same, but still I hope at least it tells us that we still have a lot of important work to do here. And then something else that's happening again in the space is that some of the people who even started these conversations and discussions about artificial intelligence ethics, I'm still not in health, I'm just giving you the kind of broader context against which we're working, like Professor Luciano Floridi, who has written extensively of things. He recently has been arguing that, well, all this ethics stuff and talk, which essentially leads also to self-regulation, failed. So what we need to do is to move on to hard law. And he's calling, as you can see, it's good, we learned a lot, we thought a lot about it. There's some good legacy that is left, but now we've got to move on and regulate things. The sooner, the better. That message was heard at least in our continent, so the EU, as I said, is trying to, at the moment, regulate artificial intelligence and kind of like think ethically, but have the law to enforce that kind of principles and thinkings that we wanted to happen. So this is in very broad strokes where we are with, I think, in AI ethics. And I heard that there are no questions after my keynote, so I can say whatever I want, right? But please do come and find me after this and tell me where I'm wrong, or come and discuss. So this is work in progress, for sure, at least from where I see this. We're still working out the language even we're using. We're working out our concepts. We do have disciplinary traditions coming into this space, bringing a lot of richness, but also in some ways also kind of like trying to tease out different things from the discourse. We have many actors, we have power struggles, we have action, we have also activism in the space of AI ethics, and those of you who follow what happened in Google and Google ethics and all of that, this. For many, we are operating also in the shadow what people have called ethics washing, a lot of talk and no action. We seem to be flirting a lot with AI exceptionalism, wanting to treat AI differently from other things and other technologies. And again, this is something we need to think carefully about. And of course, thinking where the regulation, where the hard law might be in a technology and in developments that are having a very, very fast pace of advancement. Now, at the same time, what's happening is that AI investment in health is growing. These are data from the OECD, and I tried to highlight the red line here. The red line is healthcare, drugs, and biotechnology. That's venture capital going into the space. So if you see that, I think it means we're going to have a lot of AI broadly construed here. AI happening, AI research and health AI research and products. So this is a really extremely active area. You see, of course, the spike coming after 2019, obviously. COVID brought along a lot of interest, right? Then I looked, okay, that's global. I think I go back. That's global, but what's happening in this region? And the thing I could find for this region was a report that was done by a private organization. But again, and of course it's not comprehensive. The OECD data would be of different nature. But again, what you're seeing, the second most the highest number of AI use cases that they identified for startups is in healthcare, also in this region. So health and healthcare is a very hot area for AI. Again, even if we understand differently what AI means, still it seems to be popping up as the second most important one. So there's going to be action here, which means no matter what we think and specify and how we think about the kind of ethics we're doing, we need to be doing them because we'll be facing these challenges. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit more here is something that will come up in our conversations, I think, throughout the meeting, but we don't have a session dedicated on that in particular. In this kind of discourse and action about AI ethics, there's been a lot of scholarship by individual researchers and groups, but although we had tons of guidelines and documents about AI in general, we did not have anything specific about health. The first thing that actually happened in the sector of health in terms of ethics and governance was a work that was undertaken by the World Health Organization. And I'm not speaking on the behalf of WHO. You can ask your questions to Catherine if you want to do that. I was involved, though, with that report, and so I'm giving you my view of how and what this kind of guidance tried to achieve and where, again, it fits in this broader context. So what was important, I think, from the point of view of that report, again, was the venture capital and all that investment that comes into AI, I think it's clear. It's a terrific technology. A lot of money will be made. So that's very, very straightforward. From the WHO's point of view, there's a different angle. It seemed that in a lot of their strategy work that they did, they started seeing artificial intelligence as an enabling factor. And an enabling factor you can say, I highlighted all the optimism for people to benefit from universal health coverage, for better protection from emergencies, and for better health and well-being. So there is a lot of hope also from the perspective of an organization like WHO that this kind of technology can bring about a lot of good and improve the lives of people who need it most. Now, that work started just a few months before COVID started, right? So I think the report is actually quite informed by and influenced by what COVID did to all of us and to the world. And I'm taking this from a paper that the then director of the Health Department of Digital Health at WHO published with some colleagues, which was like, during COVID, all this enthusiasm about artificial intelligence was maybe tempered a little bit because we did a lot of fantastic things with artificial intelligence, but we had so many hopes that actually you could see headlines, is the AI going to save us from COVID? AI did not save us from COVID. So there's a lot of, a realization that there's a lot to be, we are a little bit, there's a lot of hype around it. But also some other things that came out that, of course, maybe the idea that humans still have to exercise a lot of control when it comes to these applications, that we need to think a lot about risk mitigation. We need to understand and think clearly about the benefit, the distribution of benefit. And also, again, what popped out is that we need these norms around data, but also norms about the development and use of technology. No surprise to those of you who have been studying those topics and other technologies, just not AI. It's nothing absolutely brand new, I would say here, but it's important that it became actually more clear. So the issues that come out in this report, but also I think that, again, the report is not specific to research, and here we are focusing on research, but I think they are generic enough that for health that also apply to research. So questions that affect where this and should influence how we're thinking about the ethics of AI in global health research are also things that I think are on this list. Obviously, broader questions, for example, about the digital divide, and again, there's quite a lot that we need to discuss there. Questions about the data and their collection and use. I'll talk about the data in a moment. Accountability questions, responsibility. What does it mean to have technology which has the power of doing autonomous decision making? The big an important question of bias and discrimination that we know about, not only in the space of health, but also across the board of uses of artificial intelligence. Also bigger questions around the commercialization of these products, and yes, there was also, of course, in reference to artificial intelligence and climate change and questions of sustainability. That's kind of newer in the sense of, those topics were not typically discussed around technologies before, but it is in this. Now, how did this work? And again, I think some of these will be helpful in thinking about research, although these are principles that came in and apply across the board of development and deployment. Again, those of you who come from bioethics and health ethics won't see anything peculiar on this list. The way that the group that developed the report worked is looking at all these principles that have been put out there from all these guidance and documentation and documents that I mentioned earlier, and look which of those are most relevant for the space of health from research to deployment to public health. And these are the ones, the 6 principles that were the ones that are most considered to be most relevant. Now, the innovative part here is that, of course, what we know from other work is that people, even those documents that we analyze, the 84 documents, they use the same principles. There is a consensus around some, but they have different understandings of the principles. So they use autonomy, or they use accountability, or they use equity, but they understand it in different ways depending on context and all of that. So we tried in this report, there was an attempt to explain what we take that to mean, what should we be taken to mean if we use it in the context of health. Now, one important thing that was also discussed in the report, and I think was important, is not to separate artificial intelligence from data. There are 2 distinct areas when it comes to ethical questions, but they're very connected at the same time. And it would have been terrific if we had solved our problems and the governance of health data, so we can move on with artificial intelligence and all the other stuff, but we have not. And that is pretty sad, because we've been thinking about data for a very long time. We've been even regulating data for a long time, but we're still having very fundamental problems with data collection, with data storage, with the uses of data, and a whole array of topics that we'll discuss. We're still suffering in the era where we collect and we generate and collect enormous amounts of data. We're still suffering from health data poverty. And I do like this definition from Ibrahim and Al, a group that is explained. I like the way they conceptualize that, because it does actually what it does, it affects the way we actually do research, and it affects absolutely the way we develop knowledge and deliver care. And we have even other things that we haven't solved around data. I want to quote, I wanted to use this tweet. I used to do more of my research on Twitter, but not recently. I'm not doing the same. This tweet is from about exactly a year ago and came out from somebody who is here in this country. So this is, as you may recall, the time that South Africa was telling the world that we have the Omicron variant, and we're going to be very worried. And you can see on the tweet from Túlio de Oliveira, who maybe have heard of since, that at the time they were producing this genomic data, and the data were probably taken by others. There was no collaboration. And that's a very basic thing to have sorted out. I'm wondering, when I read that, where do we want to go with AI and all this fancy stuff if we can't sort this out? And colleagues here in South Africa, they recently published this paper where they explain actually the particular problem, the challenges and the governance. I think for me, thinking about AI and having these things unresolved, I find it very problematic. So we have a lot of work to do around very basic things still. And in that report of WHO, there were, again, a whole section on data and data governance, but also specific recommendations about what countries should do, what governments in particular should do, what mechanisms should be in place. And they seem to be around questions of data protection, about independent authorities that can help out with that, about commitment to transparency, and about another thing that I think it's useful to put in the equation, which is community oversight for some of these efforts and data projects. Again, all of this will have a very, very serious impact on what kind of research we're doing in artificial intelligence. There was also, and that's another big theme when we're speaking about and thinking about AI and AI health research, is the private actors, and particularly big tech. Again, here there was a lot of discussion in how do we do that in the space also of health when we have this, when we probably going to have some forms of private and public collaboration, of public and private partnerships. I mean, right now, a lot of the know-how in artificial intelligence is in the hands of big tech, is in the hands of the private sector. A lot of the data is there as well, but also in our public sector. So how are we going to go about that? And here some of the thinking was the perennial recommendation that we should meaningfully engage with the public. Also the big questions about what are we going to do about intellectual property, and of course when it comes to this relationship about lawfulness. Similarly, there were questions about the public sector, issues about the public sector, and tools that need to be developed, or ways with which we can ensure that the development, but also here it was mostly also about deployment of artificial intelligence in health, it's going to be done in a proper way. And we're seeing throughout this report the view that tools can be used. Impact assessments, for example, impact assessments was one of those. And there is one tool in the report that I think it's actually the most, perhaps, it comes closer to the content of this meeting here. This is a tool that was developed on the basis of the guidance for considerations of AI developers who are doing research also on AI. And this is an approach to a tool that is thought as to help, like an aid to help people who are working in this space to specifically to be able to process the kind of ethical thing that's going on in the report and make it practice in what they do. So in this approach, the kind of what we saw in that perhaps unique piece of work that's trying to address AI health ethics from research to the very deployment of technology in healthcare is this very strong focus on health equity, the idea that we have some emerging consensus about ethics should be, despite what I said in the beginning, at least in terms of principles, but we would need a mix of soft law and hard law to do that. Also the kind of belief that this is an issue that has many stakeholders, and responsibility has to be distributed, and global cooperation will be needed. And of course, the fact that these things are moving so fast, our thinking should be adjusting. So I'm going to close with just a couple of thoughts on health research specifically, and I think this is again something that we're going to do throughout the next 2 days. Many questions seem to be worked out. Again, some of those are very familiar to those who have been thinking about health research, public health research, global health research. There are still questions of social value for those technologies. There are questions that I still believe we haven't sorted out, and we have to give priority to solving those out in terms of data. There is the question we're thinking about a lot about how to validate these technologies, what kind of evidence we generate, questions of explainability, etc., and updates. And I want to give one shout out to the question of evidence, because that's the one that I think it's very closely related to also the theme of the meeting. We do have a big problem, I think, in the space of artificial intelligence in health and medicine and in global health, in terms of what kind of evidence do we generate in order for it to be what we want it to be. There are several examples, and I think it's important to think here not just about what we mean with AI in health, but also look at this broader space that we call digital health. And so far, in the space of digital health, we're not clear as to what are the evidence we need to provide or to generate in order for this technology, to know that this technology is actually working, it's effective, it's the right kind of technology to put out there. So my worry is that if we haven't again sorted out this piece, what kind of research are we doing? Because these two are, at least in my mind, very, very linked. We have a lot of, again, conversations on what it ought to be, but I think, and ideas about the types of generation of evidence we need to have. But again, I think it's an area where we're yet to be settled, and I think we have also colleagues here who are going to talk about that in the course of the days. And finally, my last thought about this is it's not about just what AI ethics are we doing that we need to be thinking about. It is not only about really finding where our blind spots may be and gaps in terms of where in health research we need to put more effort. It's also about our process. How do we safeguard? What kind of process do we have in place to ensure that these kinds of thinking and this maybe consensus we're getting is actually put into the research? This is some of the work that's already going on about and thinking about this. I think we have some colleagues who are going to talk about that in the next days. And I think, again, when we're thinking about global health research, that kind of process of safeguarding, it's going to be very important. All right, so I think I am done with my time, and I'll stop here. Thank you very much for listening. Again, you are not allowed to ask any questions now.